Well, first, I've got a little surprise for you.
In 1987, The Running Man gave us a future where reality TV turns deadly. But behind the sweat, synths, and satire, this film hides a vault of bizarre production stories and Hollywood chaos that no one saw coming. So here are 20 weird and surprising facts you didn't know about The Running Man. Fact 1.
The audience, what I think they want.
Arnold Schwarzenegger's films are filled with legendary one-liners, but The Running Man features one of his most quoted, and it wasn't in the script.
I'll be back.
Arnold says it to Richard Dawson's character near the end. It feels like a wink to the Terminator, but this wasn't originally planned. Director Paul Michael Glaser didn't want to include callbacks to Arnold's past films, thinking it would break immersion. But Arnold, ever the showman, convinced him otherwise. During shooting, Arnold improvised the line in a take where he ad-libs his farewell to Killian. Dawson played along perfectly, Label delivering his equally iconic comeback, only in a rerun. The chemistry was electric. Both men nailed it in one take. When test audiences heard it, they erupted in cheers, and the studio insisted the line stay. Ironically, it's the only "I'll be back" Arnold line where he actually returns to kill someone moments later. It's now ranked among his best self-referential moments, a perfect example of how Arnold's personality shaped the films around him. Fact 2. Professor Sub-Zero, the hockey stick-wielding stalker who tries to turn Schwarzenegger into a human puck, was played by Professor Toru Tanaka, a real martial artist, wrestler, and bodyguard. Before becoming an actor, Tanaka had been a champion judoka and martial arts instructor, even training U.S. military personnel. When he joined The Running Man, Tanaka insisted on performing his own stunts. His physicality gave Sub-Zero's scenes a strange realism. Those hits, flips, and slams weren't exaggerated. They came from years of actual fighting discipline. Tanaka's costume, however, wasn't so functional. The production team combined hockey pads, samurai armor, and neon tubing to make him look futuristic, but it weighed over 40 pounds. During shooting, Tanaka overheated several times under the studio lights. Schwarzenegger later joked that Sub-Zero was the toughest opponent who couldn't move. In an ironic twist, Tanaka, who spent years protecting celebrities, became famous for attacking one on screen. He was so convincing as a villain that kids reportedly booed him at public appearances for years afterward. Sadly, Tanaka passed away in 2000, but his role as Sub-Zero remains one of The Running Man's most memorable, a mix of real-world martial arts discipline and comic book absurdity. Fact 3.
Jesus Christ.
Before Arnold Schwarzenegger signed on, the role of Ben Richards was nearly given to Christopher Reeve. In early development, the studio envisioned a leaner, more desperate hero closer to Stephen King's original book, which was darker and grittier than the final film. Reeve reportedly showed interest after reading the early script, which leaned heavily into political paranoia rather than muscular spectacle. But when Arnold became attached, everything changed. The script was rewritten around his persona. Bigger set pieces, more quips, and an ending built for pure catharsis. Even the wardrobe shifted. The producers originally wanted a generic jumpsuit, but Schwarzenegger insisted on the bright yellow gladiator costume to symbolize modern celebrity culture. The shift was so massive that King's novel barely resembled the final movie. In the book, Richards dies in a grim act of rebellion. In the film, Arnold crushes the regime with a one-liner. The tonal jump from Reeves' haunted survivor to Schwarzenegger's action god is one of Hollywood's weirdest what-ifs. Fact 4. When producer Rob Cohen bought The Running Man for TriStar Pictures, he had no idea the source material came from Stephen King. The novel had been published under King's pseudonym Richard Bachman, and Cohen believed he was optioning a gritty dystopian thriller from an unknown author. It wasn't until after signing the contract and after paying a hefty licensing fee that Cohen discovered Bachman's true identity. By then, the deal was sealed and the rights were officially tied to one of the biggest names in horror fiction, but the confusion didn't stop there. King, who didn't want his name overshadowing the film, insisted the movie be credited to Bachman. The studio reluctantly agreed, but it led to wild miscommunication. Early marketing materials credited the wrong Richard Bachman, even referencing a non-existent writer's bio. Cohen later admitted, "I thought I'd discovered the next George Orwell. Turns out I just overpaid Stephen King." Despite the King pedigree, the finished movie barely followed the novel. King's The Running Man is grim, political, and bleak, nothing like Arnold's one-liner bloodbath. Fact 5. The buzzsaw fight where Schwarzenegger battles a chainsaw-wielding maniac in a tunnel is one of the film's most brutal moments, but few know that the scene almost ended in disaster. Actor Gus Rethwish, who played Buzzsaw, was a real-life bodybuilder with minimal acting experience but full enthusiasm for the stunts. The chainsaw he used was real, the blades were dulled, but the engine was fully functional to produce authentic sparks and sound. During filming, one of the metal links broke loose mid-spin and flew across the set, narrowly missing Arnold's face. It sliced into a nearby camera case and shattered it. The crew immediately stopped filming and reinforced the prop with plastic guards for the next take. Schwarzenegger later said, "That was the only time in that movie where I actually thought I might die." To make matters worse, Rethwish insisted on doing many of his own stunts, which made timing difficult. Arnold, being a perfectionist, refused a body double, meaning every swing and dodge had to be exact. In the final cut, when Arnold splits Buzzsaw in half, that reaction isn't just acting. He's genuinely exhausted and shaken. It's one of those rare action sequences that was terrifying to shoot and electrifying to watch, proving again that the Running Man's chaos was as real as it looked. Fact 6. That iconic bright yellow spandex suit Arnold wears throughout The Running Man wasn't just uncomfortable, it was borderline dangerous. Designed to look like a futuristic prison jumpsuit, the costume was made of thick synthetic fabric and rubber plating, and under the hot studio lights, it became an oven. The costume department had to build hidden ventilation holes in the back just so Arnold wouldn't faint during long takes. At one point, his body temperature reportedly spiked over 100 degrees during a fight scene with Buzzsaw, forcing the crew to stop filming for hours while he cooled off. Schwarzenegger later joked that it was like working out inside a sauna made of rubber. Because of the heat, they created multiple suits, one for stunts, one for dialogue, and one specifically designed for sitting between takes. Even still, by the end of production, Arnold had gone through 5 of them, each destroyed by sweat, rips, or stunt burns. What's funny is that the costume became one of the film's most iconic visuals, a strange mix of gladiator armor and sportswear. The director even said it represented the commercialization of violence, like athletes turned into walking advertisements. Fact 7.
Hang on, Wise! I'm coming!
Each stalker in The Running Man, Buzzsaw, Sub-Zero, Dynamo, and Fireball wasn't random. They were designed as twisted parodies of real game show characters and professional sports archetypes from the 1980s. Producer George Linder, who co-created the concept, studied American gladiators, pro wrestling, and Japanese game shows. He wanted each villain to represent a TV personality gone wrong. Dynamo, for example, was a mix of Liberace and professional wrestling gimmicks. Part opera singer, part death dealer. Fireball was inspired by Evel Knievel's stunt persona, while Buzzsaw was based on macho construction show tropes popular on cable TV. Even their introductions were filmed like Price is Right contestant reveals, complete with canned audience applause and sponsor graphics. Each stalker had their own commercial tie-ins in-universe, visible on props and signage. Buzzsaw blades by Cadre Cola, Sub-Zero Sportswear. These fake sponsors were deliberate satire mocking how TV commodifies even violence. Interestingly, pro wrestler Jesse Ventura, Captain Freedom, disliked how cartoonish the stalkers looked. He thought the satire was too on the nose, while Arnold loved it. The result was one of the strangest, most self-aware villain lineups of the 1980s. Part satire, part sports entertainment, and part corporate nightmare. Fact 8. Even though The Running Man is based on Stephen King's 1982 novel, he publicly disowned the film when it came out. Under his pseudonym Richard Bachman, King wrote a bleak, socially conscious story about economic collapse and government propaganda. The movie turned it into a neon action satire. King called the adaptation a mess and barely recognizable, saying it missed the point of his novel. He disliked the campy tone, the bright visuals, and the one-liners that turned Ben Richards into a comic book hero instead of a desperate man fighting for justice. In King's version, Richards is skinny, sickly, and dies in a fiery act of rebellion by crashing a plane into the game show's skyscraper. The movie, meanwhile, ends with Arnold impaling Richard Dawson and walking off to thunderous applause, the exact media spectacle King was warning against. To make it worse, the studio used a Richard Bachman story in marketing without telling King, which infuriated him. He demanded his pseudonym be removed from future releases. Still, years later, King admitted he got a kick out of its bizarre popularity, joking that, "If you can't beat Arnold, join him." The film's over-the-top satire ended up making The Running Man more culturally relevant than the novel ever was, even if King hated every frame of it. Fact 9. That explosive finale, where Richard Dawson's villain Killian is sent to his death on a rocket sled, wasn't just special effects. The production team built a real functioning sled rig, powered by compressed air and mounted on rails. The plan was to film the sequence practically. with Dawson's stunt double-strapped into a safety harness while the camera captured the speed blur. But during an early test run, the sled malfunctioned, launching prematurely and smashing into the tunnel wall. The entire rig was destroyed. Thankfully, no one was injured, but the explosion was so intense that nearby lights shattered. The crew ended up using pieces of that accidental crash footage in the final cut. The sparks and smoke are completely real. To finish the scene safely, the remainder was shot using miniatures and optical effects. Dawson himself recorded his death scream in post-production, reportedly in one take while laughing hysterically. Arnold later called the sequence one of the most dangerous practical stunts he'd ever seen on a film set. The stunt that nearly went off the rails literally became one of the film's most satisfying and darkly comic moments. Fact 10. Out of all the colorful villains in The Running Man, Dynamo the opera-singing, electricity-wielding killer might be the strangest. But here's what most people don't know. His musical moments were based on a real opera performance. Actor Erland Van Lith wasn't just playing a singer, he was one. Before acting, Van Lith was a trained opera baritone who performed with the Metropolitan Opera in New York. When he was cast as Dynamo, the filmmakers originally planned for him to lip-sync, but when he began singing during rehearsals, the crew was stunned his real voice was powerful, operatic, and perfectly in tune. So they rewrote the role around his talent. The character's glowing armor and absurd singing weren't random camp. They were designed to showcase Van Lith's bizarre blend of physical intimidation and musical sophistication. Sadly, it would be his final film. Erland Van Lith died unexpectedly of heart failure shortly after production wrapped, making Dynamo his last performance. The film's editors dedicated his scenes with extra care, ensuring his real voice remained untouched in post-production. So while audiences laughed at Dynamo's over-the-top theatrics, they were hearing a genuine opera singer's voice, a haunting, authentic final performance from one of the most unique villains in sci-fi history. Fact 11. You might assume The Running Man was a massive-budget Arnold vehicle, but surprisingly, it was made for around $27 million, modest even by 1987 action standards. For context, Predator, released the same year, cost about the same, but had far fewer built environments. Director Paul Michael Glaser and production designer Jack Collis stretched every dollar. Nearly all the major sets were practical, including the gigantic glass game show studio, the rocket sled tunnel, and the various zones: Fireball's Inferno, Sub-Zero's ice rink, Buzzsaw's arena. These zones were built on repurposed industrial stages across Los Angeles, with matte paintings and smoke effects used to disguise repetition. The ICS Network studio, where Richard Dawson's character broadcasts, was a real working soundstage, redressed nightly for different angles. Crew members often worked 20-hour days, swapping set pieces to simulate different locations. Even more surprising, Arnold's yellow suit cost $10,000 to make, with 4 identical backups in case of tears or burns. The film looks far more expensive than it was because of its ingenious lighting and forced perspective shots, a technique Glaser borrowed from his TV days. So while The Running Man looks like an 80s blockbuster, it was closer to a scrappy indie, with muscles, a miracle of production design, and visual trickery that made a modest budget look like primetime spectacle. Fact 12. That grizzled resistance leader in the film, the one fighting the ICS network from underground, is played by none other than Mick Fleetwood, the drummer from Fleetwood Mac. Fleetwood's casting was no stunt. He was friends with the film's producer, George Linder, who thought his calm presence would give the role gravity. But here's the weirdest part. The character's name in the credits is Mick. He's essentially playing himself, leading a rebellion against corporate media. Fleetwood later joked that it was the most realistic role I ever played, because he'd spent years rebelling against the music industry's control over artists. His scenes were filmed in a real abandoned power plant in Los Angeles, filled with smoke, debris, and rats. Fleetwood hated the conditions, but loved the message, saying, "This movie was 30 years too early." He also contributed musical feedback during editing, helping shape some of the electronic background hums in resistance scenes. It's bizarre to think one of rock's biggest icons played a freedom fighter in an Arnold action flick, but it works. Fact 13. The Running Man you know almost ended completely differently. In the original ending, Ben Richards doesn't walk off triumphantly into the crowd. He dies. In early cuts, after killing Damon Killian, Richards was supposed to be shot by network guards. The final broadcast then reveals the government's lies, and the resistance continues his fight. It was a more cynical, Stephen King-style conclusion about sacrifice and corruption, but test audiences hated it. They wanted Arnold to win. The studio panicked in order to reshoot that same month. They built a new set, rewrote the dialogue, and filmed Arnold walking out with Amber, Maria Conchita Alonso, as the crowd cheers. The shift completely changed the movie's tone, turning it from dystopian tragedy into heroic spectacle. Ironically, that rewrite made The Running Man the very kind of media product it was meant to criticize. a feel-good ending sold to the masses. In interviews, writer Stephen E. D'Souza said the deleted ending was probably better art, but worse entertainment. It's one of those strange moments in Hollywood where the message of a movie gets buried under its own commercial instincts, and in doing so, becomes even more prophetic. Fact 14.
I've got a little surprise for you.
The film's villain, Damon Killian, is one of the most unsettling elements of The Running Man, a smirking, manipulative host who sells death as entertainment. The weirdest part? He was played by Richard Dawson, the real-life host of Family Feud. Casting Dawson was a stroke of dark genius. He'd spent years as America's most lovable TV host, kissing contestants, cracking jokes, and charming audiences. Director Paul Michael Glaser wanted to weaponize that image, showing how a familiar TV face could turn monstrous in the wrong context. Dawson didn't need much coaching. He brought his trademark charm to the role, even improvising lines during live tapings of the in-movie show. Crew members said it was unnerving watching him switch from friendly to vicious between takes. The eeriest part came when Dawson played his character's final scene, his death by rocket chair. He requested only one take, delivered it flawlessly, and walked off set to applause. The role earned Dawson critical praise and marked his final film appearance. A beloved game show host playing a sadistic dystopian game show host. Fact 15. The Running Man's production began with acclaimed director Andrew Davis, who later made The Fugitive. Davis had envisioned the film as a gritty, politically charged dystopia faithful to Stephen King's Bachman novel. But after only 2 weeks of shooting, he was fired due to creative clashes with the producers in the studio. The studio wanted explosive stunts, humor, and Schwarzenegger-style energy. Davis wanted bleak realism and commentary on fascism and media control. The clash was instant and intense. According to crew reports, Davis was too slow for TriStar's tight shooting schedule and too serious for the producer's tone. When Davis walked, the studio panicked, the sets were built, the cast was hired, and millions were already spent. They replaced him almost overnight with Paul Michael Glaser, best known as the actor Starsky from Starsky and Hutch. Schwarzenegger was furious. He called Glaser a TV director who shot the movie like a television episode. In later interviews, Arnold said he thought firing Davis was a mistake because it killed the film's political power. Still, Glaser's fast, TV-influenced pacing arguably made The Running Man the pop art cult hit it became. Davis would get his revenge later, directing The Fugitive to massive acclaim. But it's wild to think, the man who gave us The Fugitive once tried to make The Running Man a serious dystopian masterpiece. Fact 16. In the film, Jesse the Body Ventura plays Captain Freedom, a retired gladiator who becomes disillusioned with the violent TV system. But off-camera, his rivalry with Schwarzenegger was a very real, very competitive thing. Both men were former bodybuilders, both had massive egos, and both loved one-upmanship. During production, they constantly compared workouts, diets, and most hilariously, biceps. The tension hit a peak when the wardrobe department accidentally swapped their costume measurements. Arnold saw Ventura's stats listed as bigger and reportedly demanded a recount. Ventura recalled in interviews that Arnold actually set up a public arm measurement contest on set. Crew members gathered, bets were made, and Arnold won by a hair. Ventura later admitted, "He beat me fair, but not happy about it." Despite the alpha competition, the two bonded during downtime, with Ventura joking that the movie was two future governors arguing over muscle tape. He wasn't wrong. Both men would go on to become state governors, Ventura of Minnesota, Arnold of California. Their chemistry shows in the film. Every line between Ben Richards and Captain Freedom crackles with macho tension. It's one of those rare moments where behind-the-scenes competition actually made the on-screen rivalry more believable. Two future governors, one deadly game show. That's The Running Man in a nutshell. Fact 17. If Arnold had his way, The Running Man would have been way bloodier. The first cut of the film received an X rating from the MPAA due to excessive gore. Scenes involving Buzzsaw's chainsaw, Sub-Zero's death, and Fireball's explosion were originally far more graphic, featuring blood sprays, impalements, and dismemberments. Arnold reportedly loved the intensity, saying it fit the brutality of the story, but the studio disagreed. They needed a profitable R rating to guarantee wide release. The editing team spent weeks toning down violence frame by frame, trimming reaction shots and darkening blood color to escape censorship. Ironically, some of those censored shots ended up in the movie's international version, which is noticeably more violent. In Japan and parts of Europe, Buzzsaw's death scene runs longer, and Fireball's body burns on screen for several seconds more. Arnold later joked that the MPAA didn't mind people being killed only if they looked like it hurt. Even with the cuts, The Running Man still feels shockingly brutal, a violent satire wrapped in bright lights. Fact 18. Long before anyone used the word deepfake, The Running Man showed TV producers manipulating footage to frame Ben Richards for crimes he didn't commit using computer-generated composites to fake his participation in a massacre. That visual effect, created using analog video layering and rotoscoping, was revolutionary in 1987. It was one of the earliest cinematic depictions of AI-assisted media deception. At the time, critics called it far-fetched. But decades later, digital deepfakes and AI video editing make that scene look prophetic. In a 2017 interview, screenwriter Steven D'Souza joked, "We didn't predict fake news, we predicted fake faces." The effect was so convincing that some early VHS releases had viewers believing Arnold had filmed those massacre scenes separately. The blend of analog trickery and satire turned out eerily accurate to how modern disinformation now spreads. Sometimes the future isn't written by prophets, it's written by satirists. Fact 19. Between scenes of bloodsport and chaos, The Running Man flashes bizarre commercials for products like Cadre Cola, breakaway paramilitary uniforms, and climbing for dollars fake ads that were meant as dark jokes. But what's eerie is how accurately they mirror modern advertising. These commercials were designed to look like exaggerated soldiers endorsing products, news anchors selling slogans, and fake corporations profiting off violence. Yet decades later, you can see almost identical marketing in real-world ad campaigns that blend news, social media, and consumerism. The film's prop designers created an entire branding bible for the movie's dystopian network ICS, including fake logos, slogans, and jingles. Some of those unused designs predicted trends like militarized sportswear and sponsored reality. The Cadre Cola jingle, "It's the cola of the cadre," was recorded by real session musicians as if it were a real ad, using the same formula as Coca-Cola commercials of the time. When media scholars revisit The Running Man today, those fake ads are cited as shockingly predictive of corporate irony culture, where brands now joke about manipulation as part of their marketing. Fact 20. Released in 1987, The Running Man was supposed to be an outrageous satire about a nightmare future where violent game shows are broadcast live to control a brainwashed public. But over 30 years later, much of it looks disturbingly prophetic. Screenwriter Steven D'Souza, who also wrote Die Hard, drew inspiration from tabloid TV and American Gladiators. He thought the idea of people watching violence for entertainment was absurd enough to be comedic. Yet by the 2000s, the rise of Survivor, Big Brother, and The Hunger Games made The Running Man look visionary. Even creepier, the film's depiction of social media fame eerily matches today's culture. In the movie, contestants are killed live for ratings. In reality, influencers compete for clicks, outrage, and viral moments. Both blur the line between spectacle and exploitation. D'Souza later admitted, "We thought we were writing a parody. Turns out, we were writing the news." Schwarzenegger himself once joked that The Running Man was the only movie I made that came true. The film's dystopian vision of corporate control, algorithmic entertainment, and public desensitization feels less like science fiction and more like a funhouse mirror of modern life. What began as an over-the-top action flick accidentally became a chilling prophecy proof that sometimes the weirdest movies end up the most accurate. And there you have it, 20 weird, wild, and surprising facts about The Running Man, a movie that started as pulp entertainment and ended up predicting the future of media, politics, and celebrity culture. If you loved this deep dive, hit like, subscribe, and tap that bell for more behind-the-scenes stories and cult movie secrets every week.